Hello and welcome back to the Genesis Designs and Modelcraft bench, not the Phase Hangar bench despite the sticker. So this one is maybe a touch random, but possibly useful. So my friend Mike Reeves, who runs Phase Hangar, a little while ago now actually, but due to some mess ups with the post office, it's taken this long to really get the parts and get going, sent me a bunch of bits for the Great Wall Hobby F-15E kit, and he asked me if I would like to do said kit with some of his parts on it as a kind of, I suppose, a showcase build, I guess, of some of his resin accessories for the kit. And the biggest one of them, I suppose, is the intake set. So, in his words, the Great Wall Hobby kit suffers from very undersized intakes and incorrectly shaped intakes. Plus, here is one that I made earlier. They have this girt seam all the way down, so it's quite long, obviously goes pretty much the length of the jet, and you've got this seam right down both sides all the way, which is, I mean, I don't have very big hands, but I can't even get my little finger in there, so it's essentially virtually impossible to make a good job of cleaning up that seam. Were it split vertically, it would be slightly easier because you could at least pretend to ignore the one in the top half, but anyhow, so this is a Great Wall Hobby kit intake trunk. I mean, you could get into a theological discussion about intake trunking and if it's even worth the bother, period, but if you're bothered about it enough to notice it or to mess with the seam, you're probably going to be bothered enough about it to think, well, that's quite weedy. So anyhow, this is said kit. I got this one second hand off eBay. They seem to be quite hard to come by at the moment in the UK, and not to put too fine a point on it, quite flipping expensive as well. This one was £60 second hand. So I picked this up a while back and I thought I'd just put together a quick couple of minutes just to show how to actually fit these resin intakes into the kit. And I've got one side fitted and one side unmodified to show the difference. So here we go, take the lid off, and in situ on the left hand side is the new Phase Hangar intake assembly, and likewise in situ on the right hand side is the original kit assembly. Thus, and you can instantly see, despite the fact that the white glows up brighter anyway, the difference in the girth snigger of the Phase Hangar intake. It's much bigger. So these are the parts as they come. This one hasn't had its casting block removed yet. That's this part here. That needs to be trimmed off back to the clearly visible edge. There's nothing complicated about that. And it's handily moulded in white. It's got a good finish all the way down. So it's got a nice gloss to it. It's nice and smooth, so there's no need to paint this, should you not be inclined to. Plus, they've been clever enough and kind enough to put the break between the two parts at the natural camouflage line break, so you literally don't have to paint this at all. You can just paint the front part. You also get new splitter plates, which have got this delicious vent detail moulded into them. Pair of engine fronts, so you've got inlet guide vanes, and then behind that the compressor fan face is the first stage. The kit has two separate parts to represent this, as part of the complete engine assembly that's in the kit, which is absolutely pointless because there's no panels to open or anything else, so it's absolutely pointless. Needless complication, easy for you to say. So that's the resin engine fronts, which are honestly absolutely beautiful, and these, as you'd expect, simply plug very neatly onto the back of the intake tube. So the intake tube as it comes from Phase Hangar is very nicely moulded, to be fair, and it's got some sort of relief moulded into it in places where you're going to have clearance issues with the kit. So in common with most resin parts, and some are worse than others obviously, they aren't just a drop fit. You will need to do some work. Before I get onto that, you've also got a little set of probes that fit inside the intakes as well for engine data. So yeah, let's get on to it. The kit part then, the weedy little kit which looks a bit like a trumpet, it just has two posts on the bottom which neatly fit onto the moulded in posts in the kit. It couldn't really be easier. Just pops into place, sits and joins in with the front really nicely. Whoa. But we do have to modify it for the Phase Hangar one. So I'll just talk you quickly through those mods. So the front part of the intake that Phase Hangar supply, one piece resin, need to thin the outside face. Modified next to unmodified, you can see that I've sanded and trimmed off essentially almost all of the thickness of this sort of raised section here. I haven't spoken to Mike about it, but it begs the question why it's even moulded like that, to be honest. But if I hold this up to the light, I don't think it'll work for you to see. Yeah, it does actually. You can actually see how thin that is because you can see the light through it down the back there. So if does this work? Yes, you can see my finger look quite clearly. You do need to thin that down. Please don't use a motor tool because you'll wreck it, because it is quite thin already. That needs to be thinned down gradually with appropriate hand tools. I just use a scalpel and shave it down and then finish it off with a sanding board. And the intake requires just the pour block cutting off, and that's ready to go. And they simply plug together beautifully, so you've got that camouflage break in there. Okay, but you do also, as well as thinning this area, need to thin the kit parts. I'm going to bring the camera down and I'll try to keep myself in shot here. So you need to thin the fuselage side here, and I've gone right from the front all the way to about here, thinning that and taking material out of this bottom corner, and likewise towards the centre, the inboard side. Is that visible? Yeah, we've taken some material from here and in that top corner, enough so that when this part is offered up, it slots into place, lines up with that break at the front there, and doesn't stress this fuselage side. It will actually, even without modification of either part, you can get this in, but it will stress this sidewall out quite substantially, and we don't want that. You want to be able to get it in here so that it will sit in there without exerting pressure on any area of the kit. And it's absolutely possible to do, as I've shown you here. I took a little bit off this bottom corner too. Just thin it here and thin it here, then thin the resin part on the side and these bottom corners just a touch. In contrast, the unmodified half of the fuselage, you can see the mounting post there for the intake, and you see these indentations are no longer present on the other side because that's how much material I've removed, but there's plenty of plastic there to do it. And likewise here, look at the depth of the front of the intake fitting there compared to there. Taken maybe about 1/2 mm out of each side to enable this just to slot nicely into place. Like so. And you can see that joint's really adequate as well. It's not going to really need any great deal of work. So then to get the intake tube in, this is now sitting as it needs to sit. Notice that there is a, shall we call it a foot at the back here, and that is sitting on the bottom of the fuselage, and then there's one at the side here, and that is touching the fuselage side, and that's what you need it to be doing that. Now in order to achieve that, material has been taken from this front edge of the undercarriage bay. This is the top of the undercarriage bay, so this front sort of hump here has been thinned out, so you can compare the two. And then at the back here, you can straight away see there's a big raised area for no apparent reason, honestly, on this back part of the undercarriage bay. That's been completely removed for the full size. And then this inboard sort of half, let me get a pen, play some lift music for a moment. So we're talking from sort of here, everywhere inboard of this dotted line has been carved away into a circle like this, sloped away. See how it's not square anymore, like that one is. And that's awkward, not going to lie. Now a lot of times with doing these modifications, the correct tools are the biggest issue. People talk about not sanding resin, sand it or don't sand it, it's just dust at the end of the day. I do find it kind of ironic that the people who tell you not to breathe resin dust are the same people that generally don't have a problem with spraying 2-pack paint around in their hobby room, but hey ho. Use a mask or don't use a mask, but actually I don't tend to sand things. Sanding's a really inefficient way of removing material. The tool I use the most of all is actually the curved scalpel. And I do of course have a Dremel, or other motor tools are available, mini drill, and I use this sort of burr type bit on that. So this can be offered in, I'll just turn it on, sorry if it's noisy. I just hold it right at the end in my hand like so, offered in and just nibble the material away, slowly, be patient. It's tempting to think if you're going to use a mini drill to do this that you're going to be able to smash away the material in double quick time, but to be honest, if you try and approach it like that, you'll probably just go straight through the kit and ruin everything, so it still takes a bit of time. Another type of tool that can be useful is this kind. I did use a bit of that, and where it's possible and where it will physically fit into what you're working on, you can get sanding drums to fit the Dremel, which are actually probably the best tool of all for fast removal of sort of a largish area. So thinned towards the centre, thinned at the side, a bit taken away from the front inboard corner of the main landing gear bay, and quite a lot of thickness removed from this rear area, and especially the inboard face, curved away. Then of course I've removed the fitment post, and the net result of all of that, as you can see, because it just drops into place, this much larger intake now fits snugly exactly as it needs to. So I'll just reiterate that inboard post fitting against the fuselage sidewall, and the one underneath sitting in the bottom of the aircraft, and that's sitting there without any pressure or glue. It's just sitting there all by itself. I also, during the course of doing all this, noticed that when you put the fuselage top on, it actually touches the top of this intake part around about where my finger is. Now the new parts actually have, due to the colour it is difficult for the camera to see, but you can see there's an indentation, a rebate, a relief, whatever you want to call it, in the top of that intake tube. Well, what I did was used my standard scalpel, just move this out of the way, and rather than filling it with pieces of resin, and I trimmed it down. I trimmed the top of the intake. There's plenty of thickness there to do it. So you go into carrot peeling mode and just trim this thickness down to the point where that entire sort of top rear surface of the intake tube is down at the level where that rebate was. You don't need to do that, but by doing that I created wiggle room so that everything fits together easily, and you're not reliant on everything being in exactly the right place for it to fit together properly. And just to show that it does fit together properly, I put the top surface on. You can see I'm not really pressing these together. That fits together, that fits together, it's all good. And when you look down the hole, lovely big intake in situ, no bother at all, like so. So there you go, just a quick one. I know these things can be confusing, or difficult should I say, a lot of times, and oftentimes the instructions will simply say some material may need to be removed from the kit. In fairness, Mike supplies on his website, the instructions are on his website in PDF form, describing this process all the way through. This took me maybe half an hour or so of trimming to get it figured out. So using the multi-tool Dremel, and the curved blade's really useful because you can come in at this angle and use the front edge of that blade just to trim. And it's also handy for smoothing out the surface once you've finished with the Dremel as well. If you're really bothered, you can obviously run a bit of a sanding stick over it to smooth it out, but clearly there's no need because it's all hidden inside when it's done. And there you have it. Nice simple fix for undersized intakes if that kind of thing worries you. Certainly really does look the part from the front though once fitted. You will see more of this kit as it goes through its build, I'm sure. I have a full set of phase hanger accessories for it to be fitted, and I will feature them and of course show you the finished model when it's done. So I hope that's helpful, even if only in the general sort of how-to kind of sense. So until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other. Genesis out.